Mr. President, I rise today in support of the pending constitutional amendment offered by Senator Udall of New Mexico, which would restore to Congress and the states the authority to rein in the enormous sums of money that are flooding into the political process. As they built our democracy, the founders feared the impact of concentration of power. John Adams, a Massachusetts native and the author of our state constitution, expressed this idea well. He said, "Power must be opposed to power, force to force, strength to strength, interest to interest, as well as reason to reason, eloquence to eloquence, and passion to passion. Balance," said Adams, "is critical." But here in Washington, power is not balanced. Instead, power is concentrated all on one side. Well-financed individuals and corporate interests are lined up to fight for their own privileges and to resist any change that would limit their special deals. Big corporate interests are smart. They fight every day on Capitol Hill, every day in the agencies, every day in the courts, always with the same goals in mind: to bend the law to benefit themselves. And the United States Supreme Court is doing all it can to help them. Three well-respected legal scholars, including Judge Richard Posner of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, a widely respected and conservative Reagan appointee, recently examined almost 20,000 Supreme Court cases from the last 65 years. Now, Judge Posner and his colleagues concluded that the 5 conservative justices currently sitting on the Supreme Court are in the top 10 most pro-corporate justices in more than half a century. And Justices Alito and Roberts, number 1 and number 2. Perhaps the most egregious example of this pro-corporate shift is the Citizens United decision. In this new Citizens United era, the Supreme Court has unleashed a flood of secret corporate money into our political system and emboldened a powerful group of millionaires and billionaires who can toss out checks for millions of dollars to influence election outcomes. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court gave them even more room to operate. Now, as Justice Breyer noted in his dissenting opinion, the court's decision, quote, will allow a single individual to contribute millions of dollars to a political party or a candidate's campaign. The impact of this line of judicial decisions is powerful. In 2012, about 3.7 million typical Americans gave modest donations, $200 or less, to President Obama and Mitt Romney. Now, these donations altogether added up to about $313 million. In that same election, 32 Americans gave monster donations to super PACs. 32 people spent slightly more on the 2012 elections than 3.7 million typical Americans who sent in modest dollar donations to their preferred presidential candidate. When 32 people can outspend 3.7 million citizens, our democracy is in real danger. This is an extraordinary situation. The Supreme Court overturned a century of precedent, voiding campaign finance restrictions passed by Congress and making it far easier for millionaires, billionaires, and big corporations to flood our elections with massive amounts of money. The Supreme Court is helping them buy elections. We are here today to try to reverse the damage inflicted on our country by these decisions. We are here to fight back against a Supreme Court that says there is no difference between free speech and billions of dollars spent by the privileged few to swing elections and buy off legislators. We are here to fight back against a Supreme Court that has overturned a century of established law in an effort to block Congress from solving this problem. I support a constitutional amendment only with great reluctance. Our Constitution sets forth the fundamental structure of our government, the scope of that government's power, and the critical limits on that power. Any change to its text should be measured, should be carefully considered, and should occur only rarely. But there are times when action is required to defend our great democracy against those who would see it perverted into one more rigged game where the rich and the powerful always win. This is the time to amend the Constitution. I urge my colleagues to support this effort. We were not sent here to run this country for a handful of wealthy individuals and powerful corporations. We were sent here to do our best to make this country work for all our people.